project is the Transandine Railway, which was the first railway that linked Argentina and Chile across the Andes. It connected Buenos Aires to a port in Chile. The railway was originally proposed by William Wheelwright, who had constructed the first railway in South America, in Chile. But it wasn't until the 1870s when the Clark brothers, who were engineers who had built the first telegraph line in the Andes, went to the Argentine and Chilean governments and proposed their idea for the Transandine Railway, got support from both governments and started constructing it. The original railway line was proposed to be predominantly in tunnels. However, the Clark brothers realised from other railways that had been constructed in mountains that that wasn't always the best way. So they instead constructed it more following the natural passages and ravines that were in the Andes and building a narrow gauge railway, which is a 1 metre gauge, so smaller than what we have on British railways. The reason that it had a narrow gauge was because that meant that trains could go up steeper inclines and narrower passages. Unfortunately, it meant that the trains had to be lighter, so that limited the number of passengers that they could take. There were a few tunnels, naturally, that had to be built, and the main one was the Cumbre Tunnel, which crosses the border between Argentina and Chile. This tunnel is about 3.2 kilometres long, and construction went from both sides as well. When they were constructing it, they eventually met in the middle, and there was only a difference of 2¼ inches, which, when you consider over a 3.2 kilometre length tunnel, different construction techniques, different teams working on it, is very impressive and probably quite difficult to do nowadays as well. During construction in the Andes, as you can imagine, weather's quite bad, and they were constructing throughout the year, good weather, bad weather, summer, winter, and a lot of time they were cut off from the world around them, so they had to make sure that they had all the resources they needed over the winter to construct and self-sustain themselves until they were able to travel down and pick up more resources. This railway is really special because it was the first railway that connected both the countries over the Andes, which if you consider is quite a hard place to try and build a railway. It's hard enough to walk it, let alone go on a train over the Andes. And it allowed improved communication between the countries, reducing the journey time from 11 days to 36 hours. At its peak, while it was running, it helped open up the transportation between Argentina and Chile. It allowed people to sell their goods to a wider audience. Argentinian businesses could easily transport their products to ports in Chile, which meant that they could then open up to another side of the world. Civil engineers did pretty much all of the project. They set it out, constructed the railway, opened it, operated it, ensured that it remained operational, cleared all the snow with avalanches. They were involved in the construction of the railway all the way through. Unfortunately, it's closed now. The railway line's been closed since 1984, and there have been various communications between the two governments and plans put in place to try and reopen it. But due to improved motor vehicles and highway construction that goes across the Andes now as well, it hasn't really come across as viable to reopen the railway line when you can just as easily transfer people with cars and lorries. I think this project shows that being a civil engineer can change people's lives. If you imagine you wanted to sell something, you had to take an 11-day journey just to be able to sell something, whereas now you can take a 36-hour train. That's life-changing for people. And being an engineer myself, I fully appreciate that the role I do can help and improve people's lives right here, across the world, everywhere and anywhere. Engineering's a fantastic career. I'd really recommend it to anyone and everyone to consider becoming an engineer.